Good morning, Year Sixers, and welcome to today's maths. Check off yesterday's answers. Then yesterday's twist it. Colin said that 30% is the same as working out a third. Is he correct? Colin is incorrect. 30% is equal to 3/10, which is not 1/3. It's not the same thing. And I will solve it. For our pizzas, we worked out that 60% of 2 is 1.2 and 26% of 5 is 1.3 pizzas. I'd prefer 60% of 2 pizzas because I'm not very hungry and that's a smaller amount of pizza. You might have chosen to go for 26% of 5 pizzas and that's fine, but you'd have to say it's because you're hungry and you love pizza. Then with our money, 10% of £5 is 50p, 75% of 80p is 60p. I'd prefer 75% of 80p because that's more money. And unless you've got a good reason to want less money, you would have chosen that one too. Then with our mosquito bites, 15% of 120 is 18 bites and 8% of 250 is 20 bites. I'd prefer to be bitten by 15% of 120 mosquitoes because that's the smaller amount of bites and I don't like being bitten and I can't think why you'd want to be bitten. So today's lesson we're going to be choosing a method to find percentages. Now I know this block is really on finding fractions of amounts, but that's because finding fractions of amounts is the same as finding percentages. And you're today going to be able to explore different ways of finding percentages and choosing your favourite ways. Okay, so here's our hook it. I'm going to start with the number 240. Okay, now if I wanted to find 50% of that, I could do it really quickly by halving it. If I knew 50%, I could find 25% really quickly by halving 50%. If I wanted to find 75%, I could find that really easily now that I know 50% and 25% because I could add them together to make 75%. Or I could do 3 lots of 25% to make 75%. If you want to pause the video right now and work those out, you can. If not, we can think about finding 10%. To find 10%, I can do that really quickly because it's the same as a tenth, so I can divide by 10. 240 divided by 10. Now you might want to jot along as we look at these next ones too. If I know 10%, I can find 20% really quickly by doubling it. I could find 30% really quickly by adding 10% and 20%, or doing 3 times what I found for 10%. Then I could look at finding 1%. To find 1% is the same as finding 100th. I can do 240 divided by 100 really quickly in my head, so I can very quickly find 1%. I could double it to find 2%. I could add 2 and 1% to find 3%. To find 4%, I could either take my 1% and multiply it by 4, or my 2% and multiply it by 2, or I could add together 3% and 1%. There's more than one way of finding 5%. If I know 1%, I can multiply it by 5 to find 5%. Or I can go back over here to my 10%. If I know what 10% is, I can halve it to find 5%. What I'm showing you here is that there is more than one way of finding these different percentages, and we're using our knowledge of fractions of amounts to be able to do that. There's other ones that we can find as well by putting things together. For example, if we know 50% and 10%, we can put it together to find 60%. Or we could do 6 times the 10%, or we could do 3 times the 20%, or we could do double the 30% to find 60%. There are many ways of finding the same thing. 45%. If we know 25% and we know 20%, we could put them together to find 45%. 23%. If we know 3% and 20%, we could put those together to find 23%. We could think outside the box and go to our 25% and take away 2% of it to find 23%. And tricky numbers like 29%, again we could use our 25% and add it to 4% to make 29%. Or we could just find our 1% by dividing by 100 and then multiply it by 29 to find 29%. If you'd like to pause the video now and make your own sort of mind map of the different ways that you could make some of these percentages, do that now. It will help you with your understanding and your thinking about fractions of amount and comparing them to percentages. Okay, so let's move on to the teach it. Within this session, I'm going to suggest ways that you can find out these different percentages, but I'm not going to insist that you use those ways. If you want to grab a pencil and pen right now and write these down, that might be helpful later on in the session. So to find 50% is the same as a half, so I can divide by 2. To find 25% is the same as a quarter, so I can divide by 4. To find 75% is the same as 3/4, so I can divide by 4, then multiply by 3. To find 10%, it's the same as a tenth, so I can divide by 10. To find 1%, it's the same as a hundredth, so I can divide by 100. As we've discussed before, there are more than just these ways of finding them out, but these are the quick, cheap ways, and what I consider the easiest. You may not, however. Okay, let's move on to the multiples of 10%. To find 10%, we can divide by 10. So to find 20%, we can divide by 10 and then multiply it by 2. 30% divide by 10, multiply by 3. 40% divide by 10 and multiply by 4. And the pattern goes on. If you'd like to write these down, pause the video and write them down now. To find 1%, 1% is the same as a hundredth, so I can divide by 100 to find 1%. To find 2%, I can divide by 100 and multiply by 2. To find 3%, I can divide by 100 and multiply by 3, and so on. If you'd like to write these down, you may. Some of you eagle-eyed might have spotted that I've missed out 5%. We'll come to that in just a moment. However, you could find it by dividing by 100 and multiplying by 5. Okay, so there are some of these different ways of finding them. We have to think outside the box for numbers like 26%. How would we find 26% of something? That's completely up to you. You might find 25% and 1% and then add them together to find 26%. You might find 10%, another 10%, 5% and 1%. It still equals 26%. You might decide to find 20% by dividing by 10, then multiplying by 2, and then find 6% by dividing by 100 and multiplying by 6. Or you might want to think about it as 26 hundredths and divide by 100 and multiply by 6. It's completely up to you. With 52%, you might want to find 50% by halving, find 1% and find 1%. You find 1% by dividing by 100, adding them together to make 52%. You might want to find 5 lots of 10%, I think this possibly takes longer to write than it does to work out, and 2 lots of 1%. It's completely up to you. Or again, you might want to find or think about it as 52 over 100 and divide the number by 100 and then multiply by 52. With 53%, you can split this up in lots of different ways again. You can think about it as 50%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 1%, 1%, 1%, and put them all back together. You could think about it as 80%, so divide by 10, multiply by 8, and 3%, divide by 100, multiply by 3, and then put them together. Or you could think about it as 83 over 100, where you divide by 100, multiply by 83. Divide by the denominator, multiply by the numerator. For 37%, you could think of all the different ways that you could do this. You could do 30% and 7%. You could split it up into 3 lots of 10% and 7 lots of 1%. Again, you could think about it as 37 over 100. Divide by 100, multiply by 37. Completely up to you which way you do these. Okay, but you'll practice it. I want you to think about what method you'd use and the answer you'd get there. So for example, for 50% of 600, I would simply divide by 2. I would half it to find 50%. My answer would be 300. How would you work out 32%? What's your preferred method? Are you going to divide it by 100 and multiply by 32? Are you going to split it into 30%, 30%, 30%, 2%, or 30%, 30%, 30%, 1%, 1%? How are you going to work this out? What is your method? Now, this method box is for your jottings. So pause the video and practice it. Excellent job. Let's look at some of my suggestions. So here's some of my suggestions. For 50%, I'd use one of my cheats and simply halve it. For 32%, I'd probably go for thinking about as dividing by 100 and multiplying by 32. You might have done it differently, and that is fine as long as you've got the same answer as me. For the next one, 91%, again, I took that longer version of dividing by 100 and multiplying by 91. To find 10%, I just divided by 10. To find 5%, I divided by 10, then I divided by 2. You might have chosen to divide by 100 and multiply by 5. That's fine. Then 75%, I divided by 4 and multiplied by 3. You might have divided by 100 and then multiplied by 75, or you might have split it up into 7 lots of 10% and a 5%. It's completely up to you as long as we all reach the same answer. Okay, here's today's Do It. All the answers are going to be the same when we check them. However, the methods might look something slightly different. Okay, there is no right or wrong answer for your methods. Okay, there's just different ways of doing it. A couple of them have some quicker cheats like 25%, 10%, 5% and 75%, but some of them you might want to do the divide by 100 and multiply the percentage. Okay, because they don't have any shorter cheats. Pause the video now and complete your Do It. Good job. Today's Twist It. Colin says it's always easiest to find percentages by dividing by 100 than multiplying by the percentage found. Do you agree? Why or why not? So do you always divide by 100 then multiply by the percentage, or do you use some of the different cheats? Do you agree or disagree with Colin? And then for today's Solve It, I've added a link to your Class Dojo. Okay? If you haven't got that link, you can always search for Enrich Matching Fractions and Percentages and let me know how you get on with that. So upload your work onto Class Dojo for me. If you're stuck on any of your work, message me on Class Dojo. And it's not tomorrow, it'll be Monday. I will go through all of the answers to today's Do It, Twist It and Solve It. Have a lovely weekend.